Behold, it's Natalia. Let's go find some monkeys, shall we?
Would you say sex is like riding a bicycle?
Nothing gets me going like Christmas and wigs. Let's check out this show.
I remember the first creature I beheld. He was a squirrel. His name was Kevin.
I heard you need a DNA sample.
I want to find light and joy in things that bring us together and unite us. And I think science is something that can unite us. Ow. God damn.
There's a world out there, a world that needs to be beheld.
Welcome back to another episode of Survival of the Filthiest. I'm your host, Natalia Reagan. I'm a biological anthropologist and comedian, and I created this show because, well, let's face it, there's a war on science and social progress in this country. So what better way to resist than to feature folks who are doing groundbreaking science, research, education, activism, and causing and bringing up good trouble to move this country forward rather than 5,000 steps back. And so today I'm super excited because our guest is not only a good friend who I don't get to see nearly as much, but she's also a brilliant and hilarious author, comedian, podcaster, producer, writer, and someone that I look up to because Akilah Hughes says the things I wish I could, but I'm not nearly as brilliant, as funny, as witty, as biting and charming, and can say it all with a smile and leave people wanting more, even though they got completely destroyed in the process. And you might have seen Akilah on her own YouTube channel. It's Akilah, obviously, and her subsequent book entitled, obviously, Stories from the Timeline. You might have listened to her on What a Day, a Crooked Media podcast that she created. And you might have caught her on her oh so funny sketch comedy show on Comedy Central, Making Fun with Akilah and Milana. If you haven't seen the updated Patty Cake episode or sketch, it is worth watching. It is more relevant now than ever. And you might have seen her on Twitter just ripping apart snowflakes, just ripping them asunder. And most recently, I know. Akilah, you're so much fun to write about because I'm just like, I can't stop. I just want to, I want everyone to follow you and love you and throw money at you. Okay. In the most respectful of ways, of course. Mm-hmm. And most recently, and why we're going to have her on today, and what I really want to talk about is her podcast that she created, hosted, produced, basically, well, it's called Rebel Spirit, and it follows her on her journey back home to Northern Kentucky to her alma mater, Boone County High School, to fight like hell to try to change her highly racist mascot, Mr. Rebel, which is essentially a Confederate rebel. It seems obvious to most of us that that's not okay, but apparently there's a swath of the country who thinks that's just fine. And the podcast is equal parts history lesson, sociology, psychology, marketing, sports mascots, social change, and it's so funny. You get a lesson in all these things and more. And it's also very frustrating, but also hopeful. And when I, it kind of questions this idea of tradition and what tradition is, and why do so many people, read white people, hold on to archaic symbols and ideology when it hurts the people around us. And as an anthropologist, it harkens back to my anthro theory classes that challenge this idea that tradition is actually old, but rather that maybe tradition is new. It's as new as the living person who chooses to uphold these values and symbols and systems. So how do we get these folks to see the light that, shedding tradition is a good thing? And fortunately, as a biological anthropologist, I know that biological evolution can take a long time. However, cultural evolution can be really rapid and can happen as quickly as in one generation. And we're seeing Akilah make that happen in real time. So, folks, I want you to welcome a warm and hearty welcome for Akilah Hughes. Thank you for being here.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the glowing intro. I think you are incredibly brilliant and wonderful and compelling as well. And I'm happy to be here. My dog Fauci he's like trying to be the guest star, but he keeps flopping out of frame. So
should we do the thing that we need to do, which is introduce our dogs? Because our dogs have not, hold on, I'm going to grab Raisin.
I think it's important. I think it might actually be the point of this episode.
This right here, I think we peaked here.
Yeah.
Fauci.
Yeah, you look over there.
Fauci, hi. Now you named Fauci for?
Yeah, Dr. Fauci.
Yes.
Dr. Fauci. I got him in the pandemic, so I thought it would be a good time marker for My like this dog, you know what I mean? Like, okay,
Yeah.
so what was happening around then? Yes, yes, yes.
Your dog is a little living time capsule that poops.
Yes.
Exactly.
Fully that.
Oh, no, he's
Mostly
so.
that.
And where did you get your dog again? I feel like
He flew in from Korea.
look at you go. You adopted your dog from Korea. This is,
Yes. I tried to get
that's
one here in LA, and I mean, I say this and people, they have mixed reactions, but there was a run on dogs. Everybody wanted a dog because we were all at home. And the only dogs left were like pit bulls with 900 nipples who were like biting the people because their babies had been stolen. And I was like, I just feel like this isn't my destiny. I'm going to keep looking. And so, yeah, he was in a trash can with his sister and a few other dogs, and they just shipped him on over here. So that's
oh
great.
my god, he's so special too. I love yeah, every time anybody who follows you knows Fauci. Fauci's a
Yeah.
big part of
He's the
of
main character.
yeah, and he kinda knows it. He kinda has
Yeah,
main character energy, you know?
fully, yeah.
Um, so I wanna talk to you about well, there's so many things right now. I feel like anytime we ask how someone's doing, it's the most loaded question. How are
Yeah.
you doing? How are you
Oh
feeling
my
right now?
goodness. I mean, I think that we're all, if we're paying attention in sort of a collective daze, I think that the state of the country and the country's place in the world is so fraught that it's like impossible to ignore it. Like it just really is. So I think that I am weathering it. I think that I am a little disenchanted by my fellow countrymen and their choices these days, but also,
Yeah.
terrified of aircrafts falling on my house. I'm just, hopeful
Oh,
that we're
dude.
all gonna be okay. And I'm gonna knock on some wood because it really is a
Right?
problem.
I've yeah, I used to have I still actually have recurring nightmares about plane crashes and never
Mm.
being in the plane that crashes, but the one
Oh
that
my
like it falls on my home, you
oh
know what I
my
mean?
lord. Donnie
Yes.
Darko happened to you in a dream.
Yes, absolutely. I did have a pet rabbit for 10 years too, and she was terrifying, so it all checks out.
Yeah.
I lost a
Mhm,
light. That's okay.
mhm.
See, my lights are going out. I blame the administration,
This
there we
is
go.
also
There
part
we
of it. This
go.
is also part of
Yeah.
it.
Damn electricity. We got
Mhm.
hamsters on wheels running the electricity. Well, I want to know about the birth of Rebel Spirit because, this is you graduated. Is this your 20th anniversary this year or
Yeah,
your high
yeah.
school?
It's 20 years, and what's funny is, like, they're planning the reunion, and so I keep getting messages like, "Are you gonna come?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I should be there this time." I went to the 10-year, and it caused a lot of problems, but, um, yeah, I mean, the cliff notes are I graduated from high school in 2005. I'd skipped 2 grades, so that'll account for, like, the age difference. I feel like every time I say that, people are like, "So you lied about your age?" And I'm like, "I
Wow.
no."
No, you're just brilliant. Wait, which
Yeah,
grades did you skip?
I didn't go to middle school really, so I didn't go to 7th or 8th. I went from 6th to 9th.
Because
Um,
your mom was an educator
yes,
right in Covington,
yes, and
and then
so I went to basically a college prep school. It was like I mean, they call them the Latin school, but it's like they teach Latin. It's a Catholic high school called Covington Latin. And I did that for a year, and I'm not Catholic, and I did not enjoy the experience. And my mom was like, "Well, I mean, since you already passed the 9th grade, you just want to like keep going in high school to Boone County." And so I transferred to Boone County 2003. So like, the shadow of 9/11 and the way the country was, and also a southern state. And so it's just like a very
wow.
specific time and culture. But I just remember um, knowing that the rebels was wrong, but being kind of heartened by the fact that my school had already gotten rid of Mr. Rebel. Like the physical mascot wasn't there while I was there. It wasn't until the final pep rally of my senior year where they were like, and he's back. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, what
No.
is this cultural backslide? Like, this is the wrong direction. And I guess I don't know. So it's like it was always in my mind that this was a problem. There were, weird racist incidents that happened in high school, like just a Cliff Notes example. We had a principal who was like in the NFL in the 80s, like beloved, ironically named George Floyd, but we called him Coach Floyd. And his office got like destroyed by some students and spray painted with slurs. And it was just like the administration did not address it, but we had all like walked past it in the hallway. So it was like things like that would happen, and it was just like it was like the B storyline of going to high school, where it's like
Dear
I have this
Lord.
classes and dances and crushes and speech and drama, but then also the horrible race.
How is that not that the fact that that was demoted to B story? I mean, it says so much that they were just like, yeah, oh, don't mind that. Don't mind the
Yeah,
spray painted,
exactly. That's just kind of happening all
wow.
the time.
And you talk about this in the podcast. There were only, you kind of said like
Handful.
a handful of Black students at your high school.
Yeah.
I mean, did you, was there ever a conversation or was it just like, this is what we got? This is,
It was really just like, this is how it is. I think the Black kids, we all spoke to each other about it. We were like very aware of how white the school was, and like there, I mean, I just felt like there really wasn't a day that went by where it wasn't like some sort of incident. And I was so excited to go away to college. I stayed in Kentucky. I went to Berea College. Shout out Bell Hooks. Shout out Berea, Kentucky. Um,
yes.
and I think I just, I became a person who wanted to do media stuff. Like YouTube started right around the time I went to college, and I just started making videos, and they were about everything. And then Obama became president, and there was just like more to talk about because
Yeah.
the racism changed. It just became different. Um, and so long story long, I went back to my high school reunion in 2015. I wrote about the juxtaposition of like, or I guess the cognitive dissonance would be the like terminology of being like, I want to go back and remember what my time was like there. But then it was also like Dylan Roof had shot up this Black church, and his manifesto was on the internet. It was filled with these Confederate flags. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was actually my experience. Like, why the hell am I going back here? And I wrote about it. It was a huge, like, I don't know, point of contention in my hometown. And time went on, 2020 happened, Black Lives Matter summer happened. And it just felt like, you know what? Like, a lot of schools got rid of their Confederate namesakes and their racist mascots. Um, in that time, the Cleveland Indians became the Guardians, the Washington Redskins became the Commanders. It seemed like a moment where the country was like really at least looking clearly at, ways they could improve. And so there was a petition filed by other alums who are younger than me. And I was just like, you know what? Like, let's try to get this done. And, now it's 5 years later, and they just refuse to sort of correct the record.
Yeah. No. And I was really, it really hit me how many schools, because, Kentucky wasn't even part of the Confederacy, which is also like, wait, what? Right. And how many
Right, they're
schools,
cosplaying as
right?
Confederates.
You got Colorado, you had
Mhm.
South Denver, or Denver
Mm,
South, you had Quartz Hill with, you had
mhm,
Tyrus, I
mhm.
love how you had the WWE wrestler on the show. And he brought up
Right,
when you brought up how succinct his point was, and how I think a clear point of why would you want to pick a mascot of the losing team,
team,
right?
right.
Yeah, exactly. The Confederacy lost. Why would you pick that as your mascot? Why are you so married to that idea?
Right, right, and I mean, what's wild is, like, we get this incredible interview with him that is, like, absolutely not what I expect because he's, like, a Fox News contributor. He
Yeah.
actually was invited to the White House this month because they're like, "We're celebrating Black history, but only, like, Candace Owens and Tyrus."
Oh
And I'm
my
like,
god.
"Okay," but this guy agrees that, like, maybe get it, and, thankfully, his high school did get a new mascot, but, um, it is just sort of, like, shocking that, like, this is still an issue for people. But I think what I learned through the podcast, and I think why I'm grateful for the opportunity to make it, is that this really does feel like a microcosm of what is happening in the country, where it's like you can really zoom in on this area, on a high school, on the bureaucracy and the people who just refuse to change. And, you ask the questions like, why can't we just move into the future? Why is it that, like, just across the river in Cincinnati, Ohio, it's like a different world where they like believe in science and art and diversity, and they're not like scared of those things. But here we just
Unless
have
you're
to stay
JD
small.
Vance.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
the worst. He's the worst.
The worst.
Um, and so I don't know. I feel like I mean, like you said, it's a fun listen. I think a lot of these topics can feel like a big burden or like they're going to ruin your day, but we approach them from a very human element of just like, right, but like, don't you want kids to be proud of their high school? Like, I just feel like it's really not asking too much for them to not be like ashamed of their racist mascot. Like, why are you giving them that problem? I don't understand.
It's yeah, I mean, you're giving I think there was a line where you said, you offer them racism or nothing, and it's
Yeah.
what? How is this even a question? And
Right.
it's shameful that, in the podcast you talk about being given the runaround
Mhm.
from, the school board telling you have to go to the side, school board project, and then you have to go
Mhm.
back to the school board, and then it's the school. Like, who makes the decision? It's kind of like ask your mom, ask your dad, ask your
Yes,
mom when you want
literally.
something, and it's like you're just looking for answers. And
Right.
it's really depressing that they're not giving them to you, which is it's almost like what my dad used to say when a boy wouldn't call me back, and I'd be like, I just want an answer, and he goes, kid, you got your
That's the
answer.
answer. Yeah, literally. Right. They'll do anything not to change. And I think, especially going into it, and you work in entertainment, so you get it. I think a lot of times we start projects hoping we know the ending. And a big question was like, well, what if they don't change the mascot? And the answer, I guess, the whole time has been, well, then that just shows the world who they are. Like, we've given them every opportunity to do the right thing. And so in public with their chest, they've said, "We refuse to do that." And I think that, like, maybe locally they can get away with that sort of thing, but on a grander scale, like, even just in the state, they've been looked down upon for that decision. I think that, anyone who listens to it who is outside of the South is like, "This is crazy." Like, they look
It's nuts.
insane.
Yeah. I I mean, like we were just saying before the show, it's like, we even look at the attacks on DEI, which is just anti-discrimination laws that came about in the 1960s because
Yeah,
there was discrimination against anybody who was not a white
a white
cis
man.
hetero man,
Yeah.
everybody else. Like, so
Mhm,
every like 51% of the population, if you're a woman, you benefit from DEI. If you're a
mhm.
veteran, if you're a
Yep.
disabled veteran, all these people, they just forget. But if you're anti-discrimination, then you're just racist. And why don't you just say it,
Not yeah, right, exactly, like,
Like
there's no reason to be a coward, there's no reason, like, choose a struggle, you're already a racist, don't be a coward too, be like, "I'm a proud racist."
yes.
Like, just own something, but I
Take
feel
off the
like
hood.
right, we can see you through like, you didn't even have the hood on, it's fine, but yeah, it just I think that it's the history in the podcast has been really fascinating for me because obviously I had like, a public school education. So I understood like there's Brown versus Board of Education, there's suddenly integration. And then the way they teach US history in schools, it's sort of like, well, then black people just were kind of there and we move forward and now we can talk about
Oof.
Vietnam or we can talk about, Reagan or Nixon or war on drugs, like something. Um, but it wasn't like an easy transition and the schools resisted it as much as possible and I would argue they resist it to this day. Like there's the reason that we're backsliding now. And it's
Yeah.
because enough people were still so upset by the gains that were made because they felt as if any group who was outside of that straight white male cis, hetero dynamic gaining anything. And it's like, let's not call it equality. Let's just say gaining anything. To them, that was an affront. And so they're willing to burn the house down with them in it if it means, you know, not letting us have rights. And I think that what we're seeing is this regression. I think, I hate to like spoil it, but I'm pretty sure they're going to try to resegregate the schools. That's what, an attack on the Department of Education is about. Um, and so it's sad to see it. It's, disappointing. I know like Ruby Bridges just had her birthday and she's like not super old. You know what I
No.
mean? Like she's maybe a year or two older than my mother. Um, and I just like I would love to see an interview with her about how far we've slid backwards in her lifetime. Like she goes from integrating a school and being like spit on by adult white people to now, the country clamoring to get back to that and calling that American greatness.
Absolutely. And when you look at those images too of her walking into that school for the, head down, but like just defiant, which
Yeah.
is why does a child have to be why do you I mean,
Right.
you know
She
what I
just
mean?
wants to read a
It's
book.
she just wants, yeah, like, can I just, give me an abacus, let's have some fun. What are we doing here? Like this is
Mhm.
it's such a small ask. That's why it's so disturbing. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
we're seeing this backslide. I do think, and I wonder, and I'm curious what your thoughts on. is this like the last dying gasp of a white supremacy that as white folks are seeing them becoming a minority, because over
Yeah.
time we're not, that's they're not going to be a majority anymore. And so
Right,
this is
right.
their just, clamoring to hang on to something that's not going to last.
Yeah, I mean, definitely that. But something you said also like made me think of something that it's never really occurred to me. So go with me here. Blackness in America is dictated by the one drop rule from slavery, right? Like if you at all have any black in you, you are black, and that now we can discriminate. You're 3/5 of a person. If white people just change their thinking to be like, if you're white at all, you're white, they would not go extinct. It's just that whiteness is discriminatory. That's the
Yeah.
issue.
It it's this obsession with purity, which is inbreeding. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like that's the
right.
thing as a
And
biological,
it's
like when you look at
small-minded.
eugenics,
Mhm.
oh, it's small-minded. Variation, when we see variation in a population, that means you've got robust health. When we
Yes.
see like I studied spider monkeys. Go with me here. And
Yes.
when we and they're basically living in these little islands because of deforestation. That there's only like 20 of them. They can't get to another island. So guess who they're
Yeah.
stooping? Their cousin. It's bad.
Yeah.
Variation good, no variation bad.
Yeah.
And we also know that within the human species, there's so little. We're 99.9% the same
The
at a
same.
genetic level. And I remember after in the 2015 shooting in that South Carolina church by Dylan Roof, who was served Burger King,
Yeah.
after, which
Yeah.
was one of the most disgusting things. I remember just being like, I can't with this. And
Yeah.
I naively thought, if people it was so naive. I was like, if people just understood that genetically we're so close and like we're all the same and there's no
Yeah.
biological basis to race, but there's an inherent need by these people to hang on to something hateful to other
Yeah.
people. And
Mhm.
that's why I think your podcast is so beautiful, is because it is a story. It is storytelling.
Mhm.
And it's not facts and stats like this whole 99, or in the one
Yeah.
drop, that's not what changes people's minds, unfortunately. A lot of times it has to affect them directly, which is also like
Totally.
you got an empathy problem.
Yeah, which is also, I think, partially why this is so confusing because, like, when you talk about the changing demographics of the country, it is, an integration. It is old racist white people having black grandkids. Like, in theory, that would make them less racist. In fact, it doesn't. They make an exception for that child, or they don't. That's
Yeah,
really
there are those.
Mhm.
That's
Or they're like, "That's not my grandkid." And it's like, "Well, it is, and actually, you don't get a choice." Like, turns
yeah,
out he's
this is
here and
not
he's
one of
in the
those.
room, and that's Jeffrey. Like, I don't know, and you're gonna have to get over it. But it's like, and I think that that is like the sticking point of all of this. Like, do think that this is a last gasp, and I think this is partially why, because I think that it is going to be personal when their child doesn't get to go to college but they have good grades, or suddenly there are no opportunities for them because they've graduated school into an economy that says, well, if you're diverse, you're inherently unqualified. um and so I think that, like, I think that it's going to be like a really bad last stand. I think that we're all going to feel it in a way that I don't think any of us deserve to. I think it's really upsetting and sad and regressive. But I also think that, like, I don't think that the future generations who have access to the internet, who have seen children who do not look anything like them across the world playing with toys on YouTube, like, I don't think that they are going to grow up with this big empathy gap. I think it's going to be something that has to be taught really hard, and committed to. And I honestly just like I'm holding out hope that racists are just too lazy to teach their kids, which has been true throughout history. They're not going to be able to teach them out of the reality of the world. Unfortunately,
Well,
they're just
yeah,
too lazy.
they're competing with a tablet, they're competing with a phone. and
Mhm.
and as somebody who's been on the internet so much of your life, I was curious your thoughts about how social media, the pros and cons of how that's affected people, and holding on to tradition and maybe
Yeah,
letting go.
right. I mean, I think that it is a double-edged sword. I think that it has democratized, just access to exposure. And so I think we can see everything on the internet, and if we're looking for it, we will find it. But I also think that, like, we are under the boot of this, like, these terrible tech companies that see the problems of the world, and rather than taking any responsibility to correct for them, they simply amplify them. And so, like, there was a study done with YouTube videos, thumbnails, where they said that, like, if you have a face in your thumbnail, people are more likely to click. So that's why you usually see somebody's face, because people connect with, facial features. It's just a human trait. Um, if you have a black face in a thumbnail, people are less likely to click. And so instead of, correcting for that racism, they just say, well, then you just shouldn't put your face in the thumbnail. And I'm like, right. So I have to work around bias in the world, even though you have all of the money on the planet and the
Yeah.
ability to correct for these things. But they're like, well, is that like, are we being too impactful? And my response to that is like, well, look at what's happened. We've had 20
Yeah.
years of YouTube. And when YouTube started, the KKK had 800 members in the nation. It was a completely dead organization. There was, like, not that there was no racism, but there was no megaphone for it. Like, they weren't making Birth of a Nation in theaters for these
Right.
people. Suddenly, we
Now
are
you've
in a
got
place where it's like, oh, yeah, you've given a microphone to these people. And now it's a booming organization. It's a domestic terrorist organization. And I guess you are making more money, so congrats. Like, so I guess, like, it's tough because growing up on the internet, I remember, you know when I first started making videos, of course my mom was curious about where I was spending all my time and stuff, and so she, like, somehow found a video with like 30,000 views, which was a lot in 2006,
yeah.
of like these two blonde white girls singing about like the Klan and how it's great and how people should join. And she was like, this is crazy. Like, this is
What
going to be the end of the world. And I was like, it's only 30,000 people. Like, the world is big.
the,
And now I'm like, well, actually, she was onto something. Like, you got
yeah.
to nip that shit in the bud. Turns out, like, you have to, I mean, and we already knew that, right? We had to legislate against discrimination to get to where
Yeah.
we are now. Like, we couldn't just expect people to do the right thing. They wouldn't. In fact, when it was legislated, they still tried to do everything in their power not to do the right thing. So I don't know. It's like it is this horrible thing. And I kind of wish that they would unplug the internet. We would all go touch grass and be forced to be around each other. Because I think when you're in person, that's where, political correctness comes from. You're not going to call someone the N-word if you don't want to get punched in the face.
This is
Bodily
true.
autonomy is important. So, like,
Yeah.
I think we got to go back outside.
No, I think there's a point to that. I mean, I know that when I was listening actually to the podcast, you made a point of saying that, like, when when you see people in person saying these things, it's so
Mhm.
jarring because you're used to seeing or reading about them
Mhm.
online, where they're this avatar and a faceless, like Goofy Noodles 5673, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? And not
Totally.
like, Karen, Campbell or whatever. And
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
and it's crazy that the emboldened nature, and that's why I think, I don't know. I mean, I guess there are probably some white people watching this show, that
What's up, guys?
hi, hello, white people. Hello, white people.
Yeah,
I
happy
am
Black
one
History Month.
of you. Ha We're not forgetting that whatsoever.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I think and I don't know if any of them are conservative, but there are
Right.
probably some that are liberal, consider themselves progressive, probably consider themselves not racist, but probably make mistakes. And it's not on you to teach us how to behave, but if there's any message that you would have for perhaps liberal white folks that are doing it wrong, you know, um,
Yeah.
if,
I
if you want, if
mean,
you want to say a few words, because I know that people make, a lot of mistakes, but again, it's not
totally.
your job to educate.
Well, that's
It's their
okay. I
job
mean,
to do
I'm
the research.
happy I'm on the show, and I'll take the platform. I think that I like to come to people believing that everyone is really well-meaning, and that might not be true, but I do like to believe people are acting in good faith, and, perhaps I don't know what the mistake even would be, right? But I would say something that I don't think is said to white people very much, and maybe is also contributed to where we are in this moment, is that you have to give yourself some grace. I think that, like, as much as black people have had to overcome in this country, white people have to do a lot of unlearning. It's not easy. Like, I'll give the example, I grew up in the early 2000s when, like, TV and movies were so backwards to women, were so hateful to women, were so, like, the idea of what you could be as a woman was so narrow. It's taken decades to get past all of those biases that were just thrust upon me. Like, I remember when I was like 15, I said something to my mother that was nuts, and she brings it up sometimes. I was like, "Well, if I'm fat, how am I ever gonna fall in love?" And she was like, "Akilah, do you think that like only skinny people can be in love?" I'm like, "Well, that's what the TV is saying." She's like, "That's crazy." And so I have to acknowledge, like, yeah, I grew from that. And also I was fat then. So like it wasn't like here's me just being hateful to other people. I was hating myself. And
Yeah.
I think that there is, you know, a lot that white people have have just been exposed to that has been passed down. I mean, there was an article years ago in the Washington Post, and I wish I could quote it directly because this is a science show, but it was a sociological study, and they basically found that like most white people don't know any black people. Like they might work with them, but most of them don't know any. Like they're not in their circles. They just don't know. And so if you don't know anybody from a certain group and all of your information is coming from media that is obviously biased, you should probably give yourself some grace for being wrong a lot of the time. Like you might just be meeting someone and learning and being like, "Oh, they're so different." It's like, "From what? That racist shit on TV?" Like I think that um if you're meaning well, if you're apply it to any time you're meaning well, right? Like if your friend's going through a tough time, maybe they're grieving the loss of somebody and you say something to them that just doesn't help and it's an accident and you really want them to feel better, but something came out of your mouth and it just wasn't what they wanted to hear in that moment. Typically, if that's your friend, you'll just keep trying. You'll give them some space and be like, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to offend you. Like I'm actually like I didn't realize that, saying like that sucks or whatever you said was the wrong thing. But I think it's worth continuing to try. I think that like the world is a better place and a bigger place when you can interact with people who aren't like you. And so I would just encourage you to hold space for the fact that you're trying to do the right thing in a world that is like actively rooting against you doing the right thing.
No, that's a great answer. I mean, that's a thank you because I do think I do know folks, especially older folks, that will talk to me about even like, things like pronouns and not understanding, racial injustice or even like things like white privilege, where you're just like, because the immediate response is, I didn't grow up privileged. And it's like,
Right,
no, no, no.
exactly. I was poor. I didn't have slaves. And it's like, right, would you trade places with like a black person right now? And they'd be like, absolutely not. In this country? And it's like, right,
Yeah.
right, right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Unpack that feeling. Like, if the police are at your door and you just got pulled over, would you choose to be black in that moment? No, you wouldn't. You would be like, please, God, let me stay
Yeah.
white. It's true. So, like, I think having radical honesty with yourself about those things really breaks down all of those like things that you build up because I think too people see it as an attack of like, oh, you're saying that I don't deserve what I have, or I had it so easy. And it's like, no, I can imagine your life sucks. Like, look around, like things aren't going well.
Everybody's life
I
sucks.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah.
gotta tell me. Like, I'm sure your life sucks. I'm just saying, like, in this country, it's a lot easier being a white person for a lot of reasons. But I also think, like, there's misinformation that, like, I still hear. When I was in high school, I remember people telling me in Kentucky, they're like, well, you get to go to school for free because you're black. I'm like, what? That's a thing you've heard? Like, I don't
Oh
think
my
that's
God.
true. And it wasn't. It didn't. When I went to financial aid, they were like, you got to get a loan, baby. Like, you can't afford the books. I'm like, oh, it's
Yeah.
not free. It's not just free because I'm black. And they're like, no. So, I think it's just, you got to find the truth and you got to be willing to understand that, like, it's actually not your fault that you're privileged because you're white. It's just like, that's the way the country's set up. And if you think that that sucks, be one of those people who says, hey, I think it would be cool if we all had a fair shake at this. That's
Yeah.
all.
I mean, that seems like a fair assumption and fair way to go. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't yeah, your mom, it's so funny, she's in the podcast in the
Yes.
beginning, and
Yes. She
I
has a great
loved
accent.
oh, she's awesome, but I was just curious of how like, so my mom is actually from Kentucky, and we've talked
Wow,
about
that's
this. She
right.
she went
Yes.
she went to the same school, she went to Berea, uh, a lot you know,
No, we were
far
classmates.
back. Exactly. No, no,
Year
no,
12
exactly. You know,
and
yeah, Janet, you guys are friends. No,
yes,
but so she was very excited when I told her I was going to have you on the show. She's like, "Oh yes, Maria alum."
Maria
But
beloved.
you're yay. And but your mom, I'm curious because she had such a strong, I don't know, opinion and voice about this. I was wondering how she influenced you, you know, growing up and continues to do
Definitely.
so.
I mean, I feel so lucky to have been raised by her. She had an interesting story. So she had my oldest sister when she was 17, and she had gotten accepted to college, but she was pregnant at the end of high school, and she went to the University of Cincinnati for like a few days and was like, I can't do all of this. Like, it's actually really hard to be raising like
Yeah,
a newborn child while
it's
I'm
hard without school. Yeah.
right, exactly. And so, she really deferred that dream for a while. But she worked at a school, I think I was 2 years old when she first started working at an elementary school as a resource center coordinator. She learned how to write grants. She was able to source things for like poor families in a way that like I'm still so in awe of, and like I try to utilize when I'm trying to give back, because she's just like, I can go to any store and be like, give us this for free. We need this. We need this. And they would just give it. And so like I remember being in the preschool, and it was a lot of young moms, and even the like teachers who were like running the preschool, they were like 25 at the oldest, and they had kids in there. And my mom like wrote a grant to get us a preschool, like, or like a jungle gym outside. And I remember we all got to walk outside holding hands, like in a big line, like little kids. And we're like, and I just remember everybody being like, tell your mom I said thanks, and being just like amazed that like my mom was able. I'm like, I thought we were rich because she was so good at finding things and like getting, the money from the state to like actually help us have like a cool childhood. But because of that, like I think she also was so invested in like all of us having equal opportunity to learn, and having, strong teachers. She worked at the school for 30 years. She ended up going back to college when I was like 7 or 8, got her, degree in psychology. And was just like a huge advocate for like taking advantage of every opportunity to learn. Like that kid that she had when she was 17 is actually the golden child in my family. And like people never
For real?
believe this
You're
because they're
not?
right. I mean, that's the thing. Like people assume because I have like a fun career and like it's like very public facing. They're like, wow, you must be every, and I'm like, no, 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 no. Like the lawyer who like worked for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and has like a husband and 2 kids, and like the husband stays at home. Like, yeah, like she's the she's the golden child. She did it right.
Where is
I'm just
she?
like thinking of her. She's in DC now. She works for it's a tech company, but they're in the nonprofit space. They work on climate stuff. So it's a great time
Oh.
for her. She's like, oh, I might need to leave the country. Might be the end of the road for them.
Oh
Um,
God.
but she was the head legal counsel for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for years and years. And I remember when I worked at What a Day for Crooked Media doing the daily news, we did get a scoop actually because she had written the contract for like all the medical glass for the vaccines. Like, so it was like $100 million contract or something. And I'm like, sick. Like, I will be saying it on the show. And it was funny because, of course, my like editor and showrunner were like, I mean, do we have a source on this? I'm like, I mean, it is, it's direct from this.
It's like the inside track.
Yeah, like maybe we have to wait for the AP to report it, and then we did, which sucked. But I don't know. I mean, all of that to say, my mother grew up in that area and like saw it change. She went to segregated schools until middle school, and then it was like, now we're all going to school together, and like, I mean, thankfully the 70s were cool, and so she was like in the band, and the band was really good. Like,
Oh.
so like they suddenly just didn't hate black people anymore because they were winning state championships. Um, but I don't know. I think that like she's just always had a really strong sense of justice. I think that she passed that down to me. It's probably why I always have a fucking axe to grind.
But
So
I
I mean,
love that.
yeah, but it's
You stand up for
it's just
everybody. I mean, I feel like,
yeah,
that's one of the
it's
things
true.
that I notice. It doesn't have to, I mean, and that's what I think is so special about you. But seriously, when I see you on social media, I mean, you don't back down for anybody, and you will
Mhm.
stand up for what you think. Like you've got a very strong sense of justice, and
Yeah.
and I love. You're also just, oh God, the way you
The takedown.
the way you rip the takedown is like, it's like the sweep to the leg where you don't even see it coming, and they're just on the ground, and they're like, what the fuck just happened? Like, you're
Right.
good, effective, swift.
Thank you.
Yes,
Sorry,
yeah, no, no,
randomly,
no.
like, Spotify started playing because, that's what has to happen, but
What
yeah, I
song?
mean,
Is this your theme song? What's happening?
I hope so. It's called Love and Money by Love Cat. Don't know what that is, but I'll take it. But yes,
Oh
I
my
mean, I
god.
just feel really lucky, and yeah, my mom, I think having her on the podcast is fun just because, she still has the accent. I somewhere along the way
Well, that was
lost it.
interesting about the show too, because like my mom's from Southern Kentucky, so like
Mhm.
she lost her accent completely, but her sisters, oh, it
Yeah.
was thick.
That's what it
But
sounds
like
like.
just you, yeah, I mean, it's like it's hard, and I love it when I go back. I absorb it because I just it
It
kind of
is
just
so it's like,
happens. It's just
yeah, it's a soulful, deep, rich sound.
it is. It is fun, you know. I do love it. And people think I'm from there, you know. And people are like, "Oh, where are you from?" And I was like, "Oh, you know, I'm from San Fernando
It's
Valley."
because you have that, like, thick hair,
Oh yeah, yeah,
Giving
exactly.
south, it's giving south, it's Dolly.
It's very Dolly, minus
Mm,
the titties.
yeah.
You know, if Dolly had a booty, but
Mhm.
yeah, and I'm sure Dolly does. But no, just the varying degrees of accents throughout the show too, because you had some students that I mean, they sounded like they were from the San Fernando
Definitely.
Valley. Their other word is like, and I'm
Right.
like,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah.
oh, you're from SFV. But I will say that you went deep with this podcast, like, because you covered everything. Like, again, like, there was history, there was like
Mhm.
marketing, sociology, the history of sports mascots,
Yeah.
how do you even come up with this idea? I'm curious though, if there was like either a guest that really surprised you that you're like, oh my God, I'm going to be friends with you for a long time, or just like a thing that just surprised you that was like, wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, I'll give you 2. I mean, the first one, the thing that I think surprised me the most was when we got to interview the man who, like, drew and created Gritty for the Philadelphia
Yes.
Flyers because Gritty is, like, so ubiquitous now and, like, he is the mascot of mascots. And I think, opened the door for Ellie the elephant, like, we
Yeah.
wanted fun mascots in the US. Obviously, other countries, I think, get a little bit more loose with it, but he really was the beginning and end of it, Gritty. And, um hearing from him about how initially people hated it, I really did memory hole that part of it because in my mind, Gritty is like universally beloved, and obviously that's true now. But he was like, "Oh, I thought my career was over." Like every late night show was like, "This man's disturbed. Like, how dare he make something for children?" Like, he was like,
It is.
"Jesus,
Gritty looked like he kind of looks like
a monster."
PCP cracked out,
Right. It's
Sesame
it's like,
Street
yeah,
character,
it's
but I love
a
him.
sleep paralysis demon for sure.
Yes.
And yet yet
A
now we get it.
ketamine-fueled fever dream gave
Yes.
birth to Gritty, you know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. He crawled out of a K-hole and into our hearts. And I just
Oh.
feel like it was just so funny because he was so considered and like I one of the things he says in the interview is that like he drew it, but he usually draws things that he hopes they're not going to pick so that like he can sort of steer them in a direction. And when they gravitated towards Gritty, he was like, okay. Like the fact that that is how a creative like masterpiece came to be, and it was always just like it was not my choice and nobody liked it, but now we like it.
Well,
Wild.
yeah, and then he was like, "Yeah, I drew wings for
Yes,
Gritty,"
exactly,
and
like
I was
the
like, "Could
Your
you imagine
Wings.
if Gritty flew?"
Right.
That's
Let's
even
not get into any
woo,
more stuff.
woo.
He's
Now
art.
you yeah. Your idea was to have the Boone County High School Biscuits, and
Yes.
you kinda talk about why, but I mean, like, if you wanna say what
Yeah, for the
biscuits
crowd.
mean for you.
Totally. Well, biscuits came from a very specific place. The first is the obvious alliteration. We love Boone County biscuits. Like that feels
Yeah.
it feels better. It feels like that's right, BB. But there was also just the reality that like when you had those conversations in person about this Confederate general mascot, the immediate response was like, well, that's our heritage. And we already discussed that's clearly not true. Like Kentucky's not in the Confederacy. They had twice as many Union soldiers. Like, and we were in northern Kentucky, like very close to Cincinnati, which was the line for freedom. So it's like this was not the move. Like they would have gotten beat back down to Tennessee if they started that stuff up here in the 1800s. But people love to cosplay. And so going with that theory, like if this is really about heritage, like one thing that I have not had to be ashamed about um in being from the South and when people find out I'm from the South, because I've lived in New York for 8 years. I live here. I lived in Florida for a while. The Floridians thought I was like a Yankee. They're like, that's not even the South because it's the North and
Yes.
South. They're like, that's like basically Ohio. I'm like, it is basically Ohio, but I mean, ask anyone else. Um, but the one thing everybody came back to is like, well, I love Southern food. And one thing that is best in the South is biscuits. Like, it's just true. Like, I've had a few good biscuits in LA. I've had a couple good biscuits in New York. But the truth is, if you go to the South, every place you get a biscuit is the best bit. You're like, okay, the biscuits are bussin'. Like, we're putting
Yeah.
biscuits for the table because they're amazing. And I don't know if it's the water or like like the quality of the flour or just like the amount of butter they're using. It's got to be something. But
Butter
I'm
is
like,
real.
that's something to be proud of. Like, anywhere in the world, you'll know if the biscuit is really from the South. And so I'm like, that's your heritage. Like, biscuits have lasted longer than the Confederacy. So like, let's just do biscuits.
Yes.
Biscuits are still
Yes.
going to this day.
Biscuits will never die. Even there's even vegan biscuits that
And
are, I
they're
don't know if they're
actually
good.
so cheap. They're so cheap. Like, in the world where like groceries are out of control, you can still get like a can of biscuits for like $3.
Dude, sign me up. And you can doctor biscuits,
Mhm.
though they can easily become a cinnamon roll. I mean, there's
Yeah,
things that we can do to biscuits that,
that's right.
gravy, no gravy. We get
Versatile,
options.
diverse.
Versatile. Very diverse. Yes. Just like the population of Boone County High School, which you
Right.
talk about now has,
Yeah.
a
I mean,
very
nearly half of
international.
a
Yeah.
yeah, very international, nearly half not white. Um, I mean, concerns now because of like immigration. Like, who's to say? A lot of these
Uh,
people did like not that they came here illegally, but they did come on specific visas that are being upended. And so like that's also strange. Like, I worry. I don't know. I mean, I obviously worry because I think that the way that we're treating immigrants is so abhorrent now. But I also worry because, again, like, these kids have TikTok. They know, and they also went to school with kids who are different than them. So now if the
yeah.
school goes back to being all white, if the school remains, you know what I mean?
Right.
Because they're, like, geez. Um,
Uh,
it's like there it's a lot of cognitive dissonance to like go back to teaching white supremacy as like the bottom line when it's like, but I went to school, like the football team was black.
yeah.
Like, now we're losing, so what happened? Like,
Yeah. Oh
it's hard,
man.
it's tough,
No.
it's hard to think about.
It is, and I was really impressed too with having, you had Calais Thomas,
Yeah, Campbell.
who, yeah, I'm sorry, Campbell. I'm sorry,
That's okay.
right, yeah. I'm not a football. That's why I was like Sean Alexander. I had to do like some research on Sean Alexander and your quest to try to get Sean Alexander on the show.
So
Which,
funny. Yeah.
oh my God, I was like, my heart was. I don't want to give too much away because I want people to go listen to it on their own.
Yeah.
But yeah, Calais Campbell and what the work that he did to try to get mascots changed, and that was at Denver South, I believe,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
and
and then
he's
with
still
Bobby
active in the
Thomas.
NFL. He's like huge.
Yeah, yeah. See, this is how little I know about NFL, and forgive
That's
me,
all good.
football fans. But
Yeah,
no, but
you're good.
yeah, but I think that there's so much work being done, that I really hope that Boone County High School comes correct and does
Yeah.
the right thing, because I just
I
don't
mean, I can
understand.
give like, it's not really a spoiler, but it's kind of a hope. We're chasing an interview right now. So if you don't follow sports, perhaps your audience might follow Drag Race. If not, if
Actually,
not,
maybe, yeah.
yes, if you guys are into it. But we found out that there was a student who would have been a freshman when I was a senior. But again, we're like a year apart age-wise,
Uh-huh.
grades, whatever. But she is trans and now competing on Drag Race, is a favorite.
What?
Ariana Grande said on a red carpet recently that Lexi Love is her favorite to win. And I'm like, we got to get Lexi Love on the podcast and be like, so why don't you tell me what Boone County was like for you?
Yes.
Because how on earth, and also like, yeah, we all, if you want a bigger life in any capacity, you have to leave that place. Like,
Yeah.
that's the through line. It's like, if people aren't going to be accepting and have like, space in their heart for anyone that doesn't look like them, then you got to go. But also, like, leaving has not been, a bad thing, is how I feel. It's actually been
Yeah.
really good for me. If I stayed there, I don't know what I'd be. I don't know if I'd still be alive. I feel like it's a rough place.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and I feel like you did talk about a few people that left and came back, and that's, they what they did is they brought with them their new worldview.
Yeah.
Address this about how loving a place, eh, how much time you decide life there does not mean you love the place less. It just means you want to broad understand the world. And I feel
Right.
like, there's only a benefit of leaving and coming back like you have. And I don't know, I got very upset because there was, an episode where he had letters written about your fight to change it. And it's like this, this California girl. And it's like, no, you're from there,
Right.
and just
I'm like,
because you
my
left
mom
doesn't mean
still lives there.
you're still very much a part of it. And how I think that speaks to a lot of people who may leave a place but want to see positive change later.
Yeah,
Would you have
absolutely.
any advice? I mean, obviously you're still fighting your own fight with this,
Yeah.
but any advice even moving forward in this current administration, of how people can get involved at maybe like a community level,
Mhm.
or any sort of organizations that you would suggest, or just any
Yeah.
thoughts on the matter?
Totally. I mean, I think that like we're in an era where social media, for better or worse, in many cases worse, is the public square. And I think that we are ceding ground if we aren't being loud and honest about like, diversity and inclusion not being a bad thing. I think, especially for people who are not haters, it's like not a great time on the internet. And like we all have a tendency to be like, well, I'm just not going to talk to them. Like, I don't want to be around people who are hateful. I get it. I left. But I'm also like in the Boone County Neighbors Facebook group, which is like equal parts ridiculous and hilarious, where it's like the problems are so ridiculously small. Like they're like, there's a truck on Mall Road that is like blocking the entrance to the mall. And I'm like, who's even going to the mall? Like, what are you doing? Why is this a problem
Yeah.
that you need to broadcast? But the other half of it is, like ignorant, hateful stuff. And what I learned was like the tiniest amount of pushback. And I think this is always true, right? It's like if you are a learned person and you bring a single fact to like a bunch of people who are just like angry irrationally, they tend to back down. And so what I have seen is like not only do they back down, but you find other allies. Like I will like, they'll say something abhorrent about immigrants and I'll just be like, did you know that like immigrants don't get social security payments because they don't have social security numbers? And then five more people will be like, yeah, I thought this was messed up too. It's weird that you would say this. And I'm like, it's tough to be the brave first person. It's a lot easier when you don't live there. So like I'm not, going to pretend that like, if I had to see these people every day in person, it wouldn't be a little awkward. Um, but I think like we all need to be a little bit braver right now. You'll notice the racists and the, segregationists are not being cowardly right now. They're actually saying it all with their chest. We can't just sit back and be like, well, I knew they were wrong, but I was scared. Like the time for that is past. It's time to just be like, you don't have to make it your whole personality. If you're a person who has an online brand, you don't have to make it your brand. But I do think that like pushing back where you can is imperative if you want, the country to get on the right track again. If not, if you're happy with that, the way things are going, by all means, let them keep, loudly, acquiring power by just lying and saying horrible things.
Yeah, I feel like it reminds me of the subway. If you see something,
Yes.
say
Say
something.
something.
It's not, and also, especially that's why I do white people, white people. If you see something, say
I'm always
something.
like,
It should
hey, hey, white people.
okay. Hey, white people. Um, I am in fact one of you, and yes. But yes, if you see something, say something. The onus should not be on the person that's going through it all the time. I know that even in anthropology circles, there have been even like using words and phrases that as an anthropologist you might not want to say, or like powwow, or off the reservation, circle the what, these things that are just, don't say them. They're just they're
Yeah, there are
they're
other
not.
phrases.
There's other phrases. You're having a meeting.
Yeah.
Nobody's banging a drum and wearing a headdress.
Right,
Shut up.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
There's not a spirit animal. Stop it. But
Right.
like it shouldn't be on the indigenous people to have to speak up and have to put, it's like, it's awkward enough. Stop. So
Yeah.
again, I think, yeah, see something, say something. But across all, I think, walks of life, whether it's somebody being harassed in the subway for being trans, or queer, or whatever, just say something. I think it's like the little, if everybody's pushing back, then it's like, oh,
Yeah.
you're not going to feel so emboldened anymore. I would hope.
Yeah.
So
Right.
damn it, freaking um
You say, come on
this
now.
is my hill I'm gonna die on.
Yeah, honestly, I'm like, as long as it's, a safe hill without a plane falling on it, I'm happy to lay you down right there. It's real. It's real out here, guys. Protect your neck. Look up. You know?
Maybe the hill should technically be a bunker underground. Maybe
Right,
that's
right.
do we go in the ocean or that where the aliens hang out? I don't know. I
Yeah,
think the
monster
aliens
soup
are a
down
safe
there.
bet. Yeah. I think it's that yeah, I'm signing up for whatever they got going on. I wanna be part of that party.
Yeah.
That's
I
where
don't. I
that's
think
where
they'll
it's
hate
at.
me for the right reasons. You know. It's not like I'm unhateable. I'm just saying, hate me for the right reason.
I don't know how are you hateable? I feel like there's no reason to
Well, I
hate you.
can't breathe underwater, so I feel like that would be really annoying.
Oh,
Like, here
well,
she
you
goes
need to
drowning. She needs so much attention.
you need to get those gill slits back, those
Right,
pharyngeal gill slits.
exactly.
Just we'll
Yeah.
work on that. We've got
Yeah, just a few
people.
generations away.
Just
We'll start
with all
slow.
that NIH and NSF funding that's just overflowing, just
Yeah,
everywhere. All that money.
right.
Oh my God. Oh yeah.
Wow.
You said your mom was really good at finding grants. Can she
Mhm.
help with
Not
all
anymore.
the science? I know. This is that's
It's
terrible.
rough.
Oh,
We are in a bleak moment. It's
it
really
is
bad, guys.
it is bad. That's why, just keep talking about scientists or science and just hope that people will listen. I mean,
I mean,
oh my
listen, I'm
God.
gonna find them in another country and listen to them, whatever I could do. I think that like we just have to the only thing that keeps me sane in this horrible hellscape is like the progress wasn't only in the US, right? Like what we stand to lose a lot, but other countries have come a very long way. They're not ceding that ground. We can absolutely, I mean, also I think the American Medical Association is like doing their briefings now since the CDC can't. So it's like,
Yeah.
there's just like you gotta
We're
find your
finding
alt
ways.
org. Yeah, there's gotta be an alt
Yeah.
organization. I still think we should do shadow government, but whatever.
Tell me more about shadow government. Hold on.
Just like all the people who are
Yeah.
in
Oh,
in an organization that got like dumped. It's like just put them together.
let's come together. Let's underground. We just go
Yeah,
underground
let's just like make a YouTube channel and be like, so this is what we were working on, and we're gonna keep going. We might not be funded by the government, but I do think our research was worth it. So let's just like keep going.
dude, we could crowdfund that. I mean, we've talked about crowdfunding scientific research for years, and I know people who've had to do that anyways. And it's like we're getting to that point where instead of crowdfunding your hospital bills, we're gonna have to crowdfund your cancer research. But
Exactly. Yeah.
just to start, it's rough times. And yeah, what I mentioned about the whole cultural evolution being able to happen fast. I mean, we saw that. Like one of my favorite stories is Robert Sapolsky was he's a neuroscientist out of Stanford, but studied baboons. And I swear it goes somewhere, but he studied this group of baboons and he gave them all Old Testament names. And there was all these like, Nebuchadnezzar and Benjamin and, Isaac and all these names. And they would raid these dumpsters at a resort and they ate tuberculosis laden meat. And one by one, all these big alpha males, the ones that felt emboldened enough to do this, died. And you would think that those beta cucks would come in and try to jockey to be, the next alpha, but they didn't. They just chilled the fuck out.
Yeah, they're
And
like,
it became
great.
yeah. And then like all these other males would kind of come in and be like, because they're the matrilocal, the males will leave and join a new group and they would try to, fight for position. And they're like, no, we don't do that here. And it's just an example of the plasticity of primate behavior. And we see that even in humans post World War II with Germany, being like,
They didn't all show back up.
we're done with that Nazi shit. Like that's not,
right.
Even Japan was like, they
perfect.
outlawed, guns and knives and like, they can't go to war to only to defend themselves. And, and it's like, I'm hoping that we can.
Yeah. Well, now we have RFK. I'm sure they're going to eat the TB meat and it'll actually just completely replicate that where we'll be like, well, that was a weird, interlude, but I guess we're back.
Maybe.
I think sometimes, listen, I wrote a Substack piece that was like, sometimes the check engine light goes off on its own. And that's how I'm feeling about this. I'm like, I think that it might figure itself.
It might. No, you're not wrong. And speaking of your Substack, I want listeners and viewers to know more about that. But no, you're right. Like sometimes these things right themselves. Like and one of the really cool results, by the way, of Robert Sapolsky's research of the baboons is the groups that were the most stressed. He was measuring their cortisol levels. The ones that were most stressed out and high anxiety were the alpha males and the ones at the lowest of the ladder, right? Because the alphas are always trying to like stay on top,
Exactly.
kind of like
They're
we're
paranoid.
seeing. yeah, we're seeing Trump and Elon just like, yeah,
Yeah.
and have now found that the effects of power are like cocaine,
Yeah.
which, and also they're probably doing the cocaine on top
Yeah,
of the
they
power.
definitely feel like they're on something.
And the
When will a
Adderall
journalist
is,
have the balls to ask, "What are you on right now?"
I
"Mr.
know.
President, I have a few questions." The first one being, "How long have you been high today?" Like, these are the questions.
Serious. What K-hole
He's
did
gonna
you
kick
just
you
call
out
out from
anyway.
under? Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Um, Anyways, oh yeah, and so the lowest ones are also the most stressed. So this idea of, yeah, this might write itself because they're just going to cortisol themselves into a heart attack,
Yeah, yeah.
or just, not, or making some bad decisions. But
Mhm.
tell us about your Substack, because I want people
Yeah.
to
Well,
read and
if you're
find you and follow.
right. Well, if you're into reading and you appreciate sometimes long form, sometimes very short form, cute emails, not too often, um, I have a Substack called the spitestack.substack.com. Spite Stack. And yeah, I write about all kinds of things. It's definitely since the election skewed political, which is tough because I am a comedian. How unfortunate that the world keeps ruining the silliness that I
Yeah.
possess. It's really annoying. Because I would love to be sillier, and my background in writing was always sort of comedic essays. But I also have a background in journalism, so it's like it's hard for me not to weigh in when things are pretty obviously incorrect. But yeah, I love it. It's free to read, but you can also subscribe for $8 a month or $80 a year. It helps, another creative person make the ends meet, feed my cute dog, and keep going in what is sure to be a worse and worse economy. So do
Yes.
her a solid, guys. Do her a solid.
Please subscribe to her. Well, sure, you're just brilliant. I know that every time I've read your Substacks, I've always been like, I didn't think of it that way, and I'm glad I read this. And also, I want
Thank
Fauci to eat.
Yeah,
Fauci
he
must
loves
live
food.
another day.
It's crazy. I wish he didn't like food as much, but he actually really likes eating. So if you guys could help me continue to feed him, that'd be awesome.
Please, for if not for the brilliant writing for Fauci. And where else
Yeah.
can people find you?
Yeah, I'm very much on the internet. I've been trying to leave Twitter. They will not send me my tweets. They keep sending me my archive, but it's only the media. It's like photos and stuff from 2011. And I'm like, right, just send the tweets. I'd like to have the archive of the tweets. They won't do it because they know that if I get it, I'll delete that shit tomorrow. So I'm still on Twitter,
Ugh.
unfortunately. But if you hate Twitter as much as I do, Blue Sky is a great place. I'm just Akilah.bsky, or however you find it.
Yeah.
If you type in Akilah, Akilah, that's me. And I'm on Instagram, Akilah H, Akilahh. And fun fact, since you're watching this on YouTube, I will be returning to YouTube soon. It's where I started my career. It is apparent that is a good place to keep hanging out, even though I don't love it. But I love being creative. It's a double-edged sword, I don't want to hang out here, but I do want to put things up. And so that is it's Akilah, obviously.
Yay! I'm glad you're coming back. I
Yeah,
get
you
it
know.
though. I get it. It's
I
a
don't read the comments anymore. I'm tired of it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
actually care what everybody thinks. That's what I've learned.
yes,
Not everybody's
especially
opinion is equal, actually. Some people's opinions don't matter at all.
right, and they're not even opinions, they're just insults, in which case
Yeah.
it's like, if I wanted that, I would just call a relative and who thinks ill of me,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. I'm
yeah.
like, you're just making extra work because I'm gonna delete it. I
Yes!
feel like I'm not gonna read it. The moment I see a mean word, I will just delete, and there you go. You wasted your
Yeah. Although I don't but also, like, it drives the algorithm, which is also such a warped
right.
thing that, like,
Horrible.
sometimes yeah, like, the hate
It
comments, which I've gotten.
encourages It
Yeah.
encourages people to make bad work or work that is offensive so that more people engage with it so that they can get more money. And I'm like, right, can an adult run YouTube? Can an adult
Thank
please into the
you.
chat?
Yes, yeah. And yeah, I mean, and I don't know if how you feel about Meta right now, or staying or going, or I mean, it's nice to have these alternatives, but
Yeah, I mean,
it's
I don't
tough.
know. I think that it's like the websites themselves are unethical. I don't feel great being there. I do understand though that like if reach is the end game and like we need a real opposition right now, then like I can't just leave that, unfortunately. And
No.
the way I think about it is if you zoom out, America is unethical right now, but I can't just leave that. I'm still buying things here. That sucks, but I have
I
to.
know. I know. You wanna move to Panama? They've got spider
Oh my gosh,
monkeys and
I keep hearing
surfing.
Panama is great, Costa Rica, Portugal is a big one, but Portugal is tough. It requires more money. I'm down to Central America this for the vibes.
Come. Yes, I actually am seriously looking into what would that look like,
Yeah.
long term.
I
So
think I was talking to someone today, and I know you're about to end it, but we were
oh, no,
discussing
bring
how
it.
the US might be the generational curse. Like when we talk about generational curse, it's like, oh, being here, all of us being here is the curse we're supposed to be breaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if leaving is the thing that I want to do, in terms of like do I want is it worth it to kind of bury my head in the sand or at least kind of
Right? Who knows?
escape somewhere else, or is it to stay and fight? And what would fight look like? You know what I mean? And
Right.
fighting, like it could just be these like it's like the opposite of microaggressions. It's like micro attacks, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
like micro, pushback
Yeah.
where
Exactly.
and big pushback, but also like
Mhm.
on a daily level. And that's why
Yeah.
even like there has been a question of do I unfriend or delete all the people that I know that voted for, I mean, I don't have very many in my life that voted for Trump and they're not close,
No,
clearly.
subject
But
them to you. Subject them to your progressive beliefs.
yeah. Well, I mean, and also I like to know, it's almost like keep your friends close and your enemies closer. I'd like to
Yeah.
know what they're thinking. And some of it is so ass backwards. And they actually,
Mhm.
it's interesting. Um, they'll use like the They Live. Have you ever seen the movie They Live?
Yeah.
Yes. So I've seen progressive use it to attack the right, and I've seen the
Mhm.
right use it to attack the left. And it's
Yeah.
really interesting how they're using the same,
Yeah.
same movie with
Yeah.
the same idea of this, like putting on the glasses and seeing the evil about each other. And it's
Yeah.
like, ooh,
Yeah, like, this is a
this is
psychological issue. Like, we need to get to a place where, like I mean, I think what I keep coming back to is, like, when as a person who considers themselves very progressive, like, I like to think that we should all be on the same team. And I remember seeing, like, it was this post that went viral on Twitter, like, last week, and I call it Twitter still, I don't care.
yeah. You could
Um
dead name it.
Yeah, I'm dead naming Twitter and I'm dead naming the Gulf of Mexico. And literally the post was something like, "This America right now is like if the jocks teamed up with the like dorks to beat up the theater kids." And I'm like, "Oh, you don't understand what a high school is because like you're supposed to be on the same team." Like
Yeah.
you think that like you're winning something by beating up people on your team, and I think that that's actually the beginning and end of the disconnect where it's like, "Oh, you don't see that you're weakening everything." Like, for you too.
Yeah.
Like, if you beat up the theater kids, now your school's program in theater is losing on the national or,
Exactly.
like, on the international
Yeah.
stage. Like, so I think that there's just a I mean, I don't know. There's so much psychology to unpack, but it feels very like pro wrestling, where it's like, I don't care. I'm with this guy, and like, I just want him to win no matter what. And it's like, but what if that guy's punching you in the face? And like, I don't care as long as he wins. And I'm like, okay, well, we're never gonna get anywhere if like, you don't care about the egg prices as long as it hurts progressive people. Like,
Yeah.
I'm your fellow Americans. That's
Voting against
that's
themselves as long as it hurts people that don't look like you even more.
yeah,
It's insane, and
it's
it's
really
yeah,
bad. It's
the
really
whole
bad.
leopards eating face party shock of leopards eating face.
Right,
It's
right. It's like,
and
and that's the thing, it's like, I don't think that uh, look, I don't wanna say that, like, Democrats are some perfect party, but I think that, like, what one thing that feels notable and, like, is a major difference is that, like, those policies were never intended to hurt other people. Like, in no way does, you know, protecting gay marriage hurt straight white people. It's just they would rather hurt the gay people. And it's like we've got to get to a place where people can understand like, okay, well that is what you're doing. Like that is a trait of a bad person. So if
yeah.
that's what you want to do, like be a bad person with your chest. Like don't act as if they're equal forces. One is like actively harmful, the other is just trying to include people.
Including, yeah, and I interviewed my friend Amanda Townley last week, who is the director of the National Center of Science Education, and her description of inclusivity is just belonging, like feeling like you
Mhm.
belong, and like it's so weird that they distinctly don't want people to feel like they get out of here, go home, go back
Yeah.
to where you
They
came
want
from,
America to
like
be a sundown town. They're like, get
and
out of here.
Yeah, and it's such a well, first of all, get out of here. How about the people who colonized this place? I mean,
Right.
let's, like,
Yeah,
let's really
exactly.
talk about that. But yeah, it is a sickness, and also, I think a losing battle too, because at a certain point, they aren't going to be a majority. It
Right.
is worrisome when people that are considered minorities who kind of get sucked into that narrative. And, when
Mhm.
we saw like a big, strong Latino
Yeah.
population backing Trump, kind of adopting that sort of idea of, well, I did it the right way, so they should, other
Right.
immigrants should too. And it's like, but that's not
Yeah.
always an option, especially since
Right.
the US has created the problem that they're escaping.
I mean,
Sorry.
that and I think, like, there's just the reality that, like, there is an adjacentness to whiteness that they are chasing, and I think that there are, like, specific Latino communities who, at least in their area, have achieved that, but that's not true everywhere, like, specifically, like, white Cubans in Miami very much feel like they have assimilated to a place where they are white, but they are also now protesting Trump because based on the visas, a lot of Cubans, stand to be deported now. And so I think that it's like, oh, like it all comes back to this antithesis of blackness and getting away from being seen as different from whiteness. And, once you think you wield that power, you will vote against the best interest of your family because you're like, well, no, because we're different. We are the majority now. And it's like, they don't see you that way.
We're the exception. We are now, they see us and it's like, no, they don't. And,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of unlearning and
Mhm.
relearning. And
Yeah.
but we
All of
fight
it.
the good fight.
We
Although
keep going.
we keep
Exactly.
we
We
keep
soldier
going.
on.
Yeah, between Fauci and Raisin, I don't know where she went.
Yeah, Fauci, I
Oh,
think,
she's
jumped off the patio.
he he's like, fuck this
Like, "I'm
place. I'm
outta
going.
here. I'm out of" Yeah, he's going back to Korea
Panama or bust.
immediately.
He's going back to Korea.
I'm gonna write them and be like, "Can you guys adopt me like I adopted him? Like,
Yes.
I raised your son. Why can't I come back?"
It was South Korea, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
South South.
I would not advise North
Would
Korea,
be
although I
very
don't know.
funny if he came here from North Korea and he's just like a spy. I'm like, "Fauci, Fauci, don't stop it."
Stop it. They keep doing it, please. Come on. Yeah,
Yes,
I know.
literally.
There's oh man. Yeah, no, Raisin came from Victorville, California. She is
Beautiful.
yeah,
She's a
no,
local.
no. She's a local. She's from illustrious yeah, deep inland empire.
Mhm.
Wow. Oh my god, I could talk to you forever and ever in a day.
Same. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I don't even feel my sinus infection anymore, but I probably
Oh,
will tomorrow
good.
again.
Oh, no. I know, yeah,
No,
so folks at home, Akilah has been so kind to do this even though she's not feeling so
oh,
hot, and
happy to
I
be here.
oh, man. No, I'm just so happy. Oh, wait, hold on. Oh, and by the way, I just wanna give out a shout out to my producer, Peter DeTucker. Hello.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
he just sent me my page. I've got some patrons that I need to shout out, but I had some parting words, uh, gassing you up yet again because, last week, my friend Amanda Townley brought up the quote, "Tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip."
Yeah.
This
Hell
is
yeah.
by Winston Churchill, but I feel like Akilah, you fit that to a T.
Thank
You do
you.
such a good
I do
because
tell a
you're
lot of
also
people.
well, no, but you're thoughtful when it matters,
Mhm,
and you're biting when it's deserved, and you don't back down and you stand up for what's right, whether it's affecting you or other people, which is something
mhm.
that I feel like everybody can take notes from and should do the same, and especially moving forward. It's the time to be a little bit more outspoken
Yeah.
and you interviewed Ronan Farrow, and he said something that really stuck with me, and I think it stuck with you. Is that when you're feeling sort of just frustrated, he said, you have to indulge in the fantasy of being heroic. When the going gets tough, and I feel like you don't have to indulge because you are heroic on all counts.
Thank
Honestly,
you.
seriously, no, and I feel like I just want you to know I believe that deeply, and I think others do too, and that's why people really do respond to you in this podcast. So I want to say thank you. And people, please listen to Rebel
Yeah, you gotta
Spirit.
hear it. You have to
You
hear
got to
it, and
hear it.
I bet you it's different than what you're even imagining in this moment. It is a surprising podcast.
It is. And all the different characters are just, I don't know. I'm endlessly fascinated and I have more questions, but that will be for a different time.
Yes.
So thank you so much. And I
Thank you for having
appreciate
me.
you. Yes, of course. And so I also want to thank Peter DeTucker for producing this. You are a savior every week. And next week, I'm thrilled to have on another good friend who is an epidemiologist, Dr. Neil Vora. He's former CDC doctor, and he's currently the executive director of the Preventing Pandemics at the Source Coalition. I can't say the name of the place, but he is a big deal. So tune in next week, Tuesday, February 25th at 3 p.m. Pacific time. And please be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode because everybody should hear it, and also listen to Rebel Spirit. And until next week, remember, sometimes you got to get dirty to survive. And I'm going to read the patrons. But hold on one second. I'm still clunky doing this. Okay. Daniel Wynn, Claude Allen, Tom, just simply Tom, Skullbeard, Tori Yates Orr, Redding Maley, Dana Logan, Michael Z. Weinstock, David Leitner, James Hudspeth, Anthony Zana, Tom Berman. Oh, hey, Tom. It was his birthday this week. Jen Beverstock. I went to high school with her. Scott Froschauer, JSB, Jeff Cohen, Andrea Bloom, Jonathan Marks, who's also had a birthday recently. Thank you so much. And until next week, stay filthy.